Okay, let's try now. Okay, whatever. Oh man, I don't know how to do this live streaming thing. Okay, how do I get the link of it? This is still a struggle. Change a thumbnail. Nope. So right now I'm currently struggling on the YouTube interface because I don't know how to get a link to the live stream for me to share with my team. Videos? Dashboard. Oh my god. Channel? No. Maybe? Oh yes, here we go. Great. I figured it out. I figured it out. Uh oh, now I hear myself. This is bad. Okay, here we go. Da, da, da. Okay, just gonna edit my message to my team. Okay, share with HSDS React. Great, sure. All right, cool. I think it's working. Just verifying one more time. Is it live? Is it live? Hello, 111. Okay, I hear myself. We're good. All right, turning on my camera. There we go. Hi. So, man, I think every single one of these live streams, it's just gonna, the first 5 minutes is just gonna be me struggling through it because I have no idea how to set this stuff up. Morning, whoever it is that might be watching, or like right now, or watching after the fact. Hope you're doing well. It's Q here, and today we're gonna be going deep into the world of CSS and JavaScript. So at Help Scout, we have a custom CSS and JavaScript solution, a library called Fancy, which is something I wrote, powered by some other libraries. And it's been working great for us. This is how we've been doing the front-end React-based code to help encapsulate and control how our CSS renders and is compiled on the front end, which is great. So I'm gonna share my screen now. Desktop and yeah, great, cool. So here's the library. These are the features. It uses emotion under the hood. This is really important. And these are the things that it can do that no other CSS in JavaScript solution can do out of the box. There is iframe support and there is scoping. Iframe support is really important because our products, specifically Beacon 2, needs to be able to render with everything within an iframe on a client or on a user site. So by default, I guess I'll just start like some sort of sketch pad, code pad thing. All right. So by default, how it works is these libraries, they have to mount the styles somewhere. So they will mount the styles on a Windows document object, and the styles go here. I'll go a little bit more in depth after this. But this doesn't work if you're within an iframe, because if you're within iframe, you have window document, and now you have your document object model, blah, 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 blah. And your iframe lives here, and your iframe also has a document. So if your component renders here, the styles need to go into this document, not this one. As of today, Styled Components has made a really big update, as well as Emotion. Emotion's now on version 10. When I built this, Emotion was on version 9. They did not have a way for you to do this out of the box. Now I think it might be possible, but not out of the box. You might have to write something to kind of facilitate that happening. I don't know. But yeah, they weren't able to do this before. And this was crucial for us to get. This was a crucial feature for us to even adapt anything like this. The other one is the idea of scoping. So scoping is really important because when any one of these libraries generates a style, it'll be like in case of Emotion, it'd be CSS / some sort of hash. And this hash is unique to that generated style. This is a big feature of why people use CSS and JavaScript to begin with. These styles are guaranteed to be unique, never conflicting. Therefore, you don't have to think about CSS hierarchy, CSS architecture, any of that kind of stuff. The library takes care of it for you. However, when these styles generate, it's always at this base level, a singular class level. Therefore, it's not going to be as strong compared to potentially other CSS you might have that you might want to integrate with. So if you're building components or a sub application that's supposed to integrate into a larger existing system with existing styles, sometimes something like this won't cut it. Because if you had an input, right, with a class name of, that eventually generates a class name of that, but within your existing system, if you had something like this, doesn't matter what you write here, doesn't matter how well it's scoped, it doesn't matter how unique the class name is, this will always override this. So what happens if you need to integrate your uniquely special, very awesome React input into some vague application root mounter thing in your main application? So let's say I have my app, and then we have some code, and then we have this sub app here. Right. And this is where the React application is actually built. Everything else could be in something else, PHP, Rails, whatever, it doesn't matter. So now your fancy input renders here. And then when it gets compiled to HTML, this is what it looks like, great. However, like I mentioned before, this style will override this one, and now all the hard work you put into CSS and JavaScript is ruined because this just breaks it. So that's why we need something like scoping. So scoping is a concept I kind of added to this whole CSS and JavaScript stuff where via a provider, I call it a scope provider, you can give it some scope. Scope provider, great. And anything you put inside, the scope will get prefixed to the styles that get generated. So the convention I kind of have is if you want to make your style stronger, just add HTML to it. Or if you want it doubly strong, HTML body. Or if you know of a particular root div that you can kind of rely on, it could be app, it could be anything you want. I'm just going to say app. Therefore, when your input renders, like what we had before, the styles will be HTML body app CSS hyphen something, and now your inputs render. And this particular style that gets generated is super powerful compared to everything else. And that means that it will render just fine and nothing else will break it, for the most part. So things that can still break it are if you globally, for example, had color of red, and you're just writing your input, blah, blah, blah. It's all great. And then when your input renders in the document, it's like, why is my text red? I never told it to be red. And that's because the styles just exist in your current environment, and it gets inherited down. There is a very interesting CSS property, CSS unset, that allows you to basically unset everything that kind of came before it. Like that, which is nice. But you have to, and then I believe you can, there is a way where you can apply this to all rules. However, it's not supported in IE, and we have to support IE 11 for our stack, so this doesn't work, and I'm just going to ignore that for now. So yes, we want a CSS and JavaScript library. Great. We want scoping, and we want iframe support and theming. So theming comes with things like styled components and motion, so that's why I decided to use it. And we want to be able to write plain CSS. So there are two camps within the world of CSS and JavaScript. There is the the template literal camp, which looks like this, where you have styled, and that's like a function that you do this. This is the motion style, or you have something like this. And then there is the other one, And here you just write plain CSS like you would as a string. And then there is the other one where you basically construct an object that gets either compiled down or computed as inline styles. So you have something that looks like this. I believe JSS does this. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on this. It does something like this, where you have that, and then you would do background red, and so on. And this is a standard object. So if you had something like margin right, it would be like that. Whereas here, normal CSS, you would just do that. And there is, so you have this, This one is, I don't know, CSS as objects. This is CSS as strings. I think I'm going to split this live stream into multiple chunks. One is like an introduction. I'm just thinking to myself, it's because there's a lot to go through, and I don't want this person to have to like sit an hour to like figure out what it is they want to tune into. So I'll split this into multiple chunks. That's a good idea. First one is just an introduction, which is what I'm doing right now, and the other one is diving into code things, probably. I don't know. We'll see. So yeah, so we have different camps. One is CSS as strings. One is CSS as objects that gets compiled. And this one, depending on the library, it compiles down to a class name like that, similar to styled components and emotion. The other one is it literally transforms it to inline styles that get computed into your div or whatever it is, like this. Style, and it would be like background red and so on. So I think the advantage of using a library that eventually compiles down to styles is you need to be able to support pseudo CSS, like hover, for example, and media queries and keyframes. Keyframes are used in animations. They look like this. So unless you spend a lot of work with your JavaScript, it's very difficult to write styles for hover, active, and focus, and any combinations of those two, because you can have something that's currently focus and then hover and so on. And with the CSS and JavaScript libraries, like the ones as strings, you're able to write them as normal. So the neat thing about either styled components or emotion is they use a CSS processor. It's not a preprocessor. Post-processor. It uses a CSS compiler that runs on the client side to compile these styles. And it supports nesting using the ampersand thing that you would get from Sass, less, or SCSS out of the box, which is really nice. So you can do things like add hover and focus and write your styles, and it'll get compiled to the CSS, hover, focus, and so on. So this is really nice. Keeps your styles encapsulated really, really well. And I think for libraries like JS, again, don't quote, I forget the name of this, JSS or something like that, you would have to do something like this. Hover, create a new object, and then write your styles within that particular pseudo. And for media queries, I believe it's the same. You'd have to do something like media something something, and that's how you start targeting your media queries. Inside of styled components and emotion, you can do @media min with, I don't know, 740, 768, and type it like that. It's nested again. It's very similar to Sass, less, and SCSS. So when I was evaluating Fancy, I knew about CSS and JavaScript for a long time. I mean, CSS is my jam. That's why I was hired at Help Scout to help fix their CSS. So I've been following all the development that's been happening in the world of CSS. So around the time when post-CSS started becoming more of a thing, and CSS and JavaScript started becoming more of a thing because of React and Vue, I suppose, but more so on the React side. And there was a divergence in like how people were supposed to do this. And because folks were still trying to figure it out, I didn't want to explore any of that kind of stuff yet until I felt like I had a better understanding. And I felt like the conventions were a little bit more mature. Um, and after evaluating different libraries and different models of how you're supposed to do this, I eventually went with the styled components / emotion route. I like being able to write normal CSS as a string. That's really nice compared to having to construct objects. Oh, how can I forget? There's one more thing that's sort of in this CSS and JavaScript realm, but not really, and that is CSS modules. This particular library / solution is older compared to emotion and styled components and so on. And this one, what it does is that you need to hook this into your compiler. That's usually Webpack. And what it does is it'll read your CSS styles and basically transform those class names into unique hash class names. And those particular hash class names then get attached to your DOM element somehow. So if you had a class like, I don't know, hello, and when it runs through Webpack and the CSS modules library, this gets computed to something like that. It gets a hash, and then that's the one that gets rendered into the browser. Benefit of this is that you can hook up Sass and all that kind of stuff and render however it is you want, but there are limitations to it. And that is, you need a build system in order to use this. The other ones, like styled components, JSS, there are more. There's Glamour, which eventually became Emotion. There's a bunch of them. There's a difference. CSS modules and all that stuff require a build system, require Webpack. These ones don't. They ship as part of your code. So when you load a library, or especially if you create a component library or a design system or something that's designed to be consumed by something else, your styled components work with your components. Your CSS works with your components out of the box. No build system required. No tweaking of Webpack, no tweaking of Grunt, Gulp, or whatever it is you use. And that's amazing, right? I hate fiddling with the Webpack stuff, and this solves all that. The downside, of course, is that you have to ship a library as part of your code. And this is what led me to look at Emotion rather than styled components, because at the time, styled components was massive. It was like, I don't know, 30 kilobytes, 50 kilobytes, something like that gzipped. But Emotion was like 7 or 10, something like that gzipped. And that was a no-brainer for me to pick something like Emotion. And the reason why Emotion is so small is because they've omitted a lot of features that come from styled components. So, for example, here's a big one. In styled components, they established this convention where you do styled and the component you want, and then you start typing whatever. By default, out of the box Emotion, you can't do that. You have to do styled, and you instantiate a function where you pass in your DOM element that you want to create, and then you would pass in your styles. So in order for you to write something like this inside of Emotion, you have to use their Babel plugin. I believe it's just Babel plugin Emotion or preset Emotion, something like that. One of those. And that allows you to write something like this. So then, when your Babel gets compiled via Babel or Webpack or whatever, it transforms it to something that Emotion can understand, and then Emotion knows how to compile it. So how Emotion was able to stay so slim was that they abstracted some of that complexity and some of that overhead and weight to a Babel plugin, which I think is very, very, very smart, because then it's opt-in for those features that you may or may not need, and it keeps the library small when it gets shipped alongside all the other code that you're writing. So yeah, so that's why eventually I went with Emotion for this particular system. And yeah, it's a long story for how that kind of worked. I mean, there's more to it. I think, how long have I been streaming? I have no idea. But I'm gonna tell you a tale of how all this kind of stuff began coming up with. And again, this has nothing to do with code. This is just like the introduction of all this. So, 2 retreats ago, for Help Scout Company retreat, I decided to, on a plane, write a prototype of how this was supposed to work. I had already done my research. I had already understood the systems of how this was going to work. So actually no. This kind of gets into the technical side of it. So I'm gonna create a new stream just for that. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're interested, stay tuned for the story of how this kind of stuff came about. And also, that's when I'll start diving into the technical side. Cool. Thanks so much. Take it easy. Bye.